The snow came early that year. Timber Ridge, nestled high in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana, had always been the kind of town where winter crept in like an old ghost. But this storm slammed in with no warning, blotting out the sky and swallowing sound in thick sheets of white. Sawyer Quinn tightened his grip on the wheel as his government-issued Jeep fought against the rising drifts on the Ranger Road. Wind howled like something wounded between the black pines, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. He wasn't even supposed to be out here tonight. But when your gut keeps whispering that something's off, you learn not to ignore it, especially when your guts saved your life more times than you can count. A shrill alert from the radio buzzed, then fizzled out in static. Typical. Timber Ridge's comms were already patchy, and now the storm was chewing up everything it touched. Sawyer rubbed the scar above his right brow, a gift from a fall in Kandahar, then leaned forward to peer through the fogged windshield. That's when he saw it. A horse. No, the horse, jet black, standing in the dead center of the road, not running, not skittish like any normal Mustang in a blizzard, just staring. Sawyer slammed the brakes. The Jeep skidded hard on the ice, fishtailed once, then slammed nose first into a snow-covered tree. The airbag didn't deploy, but the jolt knocked the wind out of him. Steam hissed up from under the hood, fogging the cracked windshield. He sat there for a beat, heart hammering, breath freezing in the air. Then he looked up. The horse was still there, unmoving, watching. He opened the door slowly, grabbing his parka and flashlight. The cold slapped him like a live wire. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped out, pulse rising. Something about this didn't sit right. Not just the fact that the animal hadn't bolted, but the look in its eyes. There was something. Recognition? Number. That'd be insane, but it was there. His breath caught. "Easy, boy," he muttered, voice muffled under his wool collar. "Not looking to hurt you." The horse didn't flinch. It simply turned, limping slightly, and began walking toward the tree line, glancing back as if to make sure Sawyer was following. For a long second, he stood frozen, torn between reason and instinct. He should call it in, return to base, get that front bumper looked at. But Harper's voice echoed suddenly in his mind, crisp and sharp from a memory he hadn't dared replay in months. "If anything ever happens to me, don't believe the report, follow what doesn't make sense." His chest tightened. Harper Lang had been his closest friend in this job. She vanished 6 months ago during a solo trail sweep in the Iron Hook sector, the file stamped presumed dead without a body. Sawyer had never bought it, but he'd had nothing to go on. Until now. He grabbed his rifle from the back seat, slung it over his shoulder, and followed the horse. They moved deeper into the forest, the wind whistling low between the pines. Every step felt surreal, like walking through a dream that could snap into nightmare at any moment. The snow was thick and unrelenting, but the horse kept moving with a strange determination. Not fast, not wild, just steady, like it had a purpose. The path narrowed into a gully where trees bent low under the weight of snow. Sawyer's boots slipped more than once, but the horse never strayed far ahead, always pausing, waiting. And then, without warning, it stopped. It stood over a large snowdrift at the base of a rocky slope and began pawing at the ground. The way its hooves struck the snow, methodically, insistently, made Sawyer's heart lurch. He dropped to his knees beside it, digging with gloved hands, the cold biting through the fabric. Minutes passed before he hit something solid. Not rock, plastic, cracked, caked in ice. He wiped the frost away, and his breath hitched. A GPS locator beacon, military grade, broken, likely useless now. But engraved along the side, barely visible under the damage, were two scratched letters, H.L. Sawyer's hand trembled. Harper Lang. He sat back hard in the snow, blinking against the sting in his eyes. The horse stood close, breath visible in the cold, those deep amber eyes locked on him. He stared back, voice hoarse. "This wasn't a coincidence. You knew her, didn't you?" The horse gave a soft snort, dipping its head slightly. It could have been the wind, could have been wishful thinking. But Sawyer didn't care. He stood slowly, cradling the broken device, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. For the first time in months, he wasn't patrolling out of duty. He was hunting for truth, and whatever this horse was, beast, sign, guide, it wasn't leading him away, it was leading him back, to Harper, to whatever lay buried beneath this mountain of silence and snow, to the story no one wanted uncovered, and he was ready to follow it into the storm. The blizzard hadn't let up. Snow battered the canopy above like drumbeats from some distant war, and every gust of wind felt like it could strip flesh from bone. Sawyer moved slowly, boots crunching in deep drifts as he trailed behind the Mustang, Cole, as he now called the stallion in his head. Cole didn't seem to mind the storm. He limped, yes, but with purpose, head low and steps sure, like he'd walked this path before. Sawyer's fingers were numb even inside insulated gloves. He adjusted his grip on the rifle slung over his back and checked his compass again, only to curse when the needle spun wildly, useless. The dense forest here always played tricks with navigation, but this was different. He was deep in the backcountry now, deeper than any marked trail, and well past the region where he and Harper used to patrol. Cole stopped suddenly, ears flicking. Sawyer froze too, scanning the tree line with narrowed eyes. "Something wrong," he murmured. Cole snorted softly, then moved forward again, toward what looked like nothing more than a pile of snow-covered rocks. But as Sawyer got closer, he saw the angles weren't natural. Metal, bolted plates, a steel door, half concealed beneath years of snowfall and branches. He stepped forward, brushing snow from the edge with his glove. A keypad, rusted, broken. The door didn't budge. Sawyer circled the structure and found a collapsed ventilation shaft halfway buried in ice. It took 20 minutes, a folding shovel, and some creative cursing to make the hole wide enough to squeeze through. Cole waited outside, pacing slightly, his breath pluming in the freezing air. Inside, the dark swallowed everything. Sawyer clicked on his flashlight, the beam flickering against cold concrete and rust-streaked walls. The air smelled of rot, metal, and old blood. He moved cautiously down a corridor lined with empty storage racks and overturned furniture. Dust. Silence. Then something caught his light, a smear of dried blood. He followed it to a small room, a holding cell, or maybe a bunker command post. A shattered chair, a torn ranger badge, half buried beneath debris. Sawyer picked it up with a shaky hand. The name had been scratched away, but the initials remained. H.L. His stomach turned. Then he saw it, on the back wall, carved deep into the concrete with what looked like a blade. "Trust no one." Underneath, scratched smaller, messier. "They're using the service." Sawyer's throat tightened. This wasn't a trap. This was a prison. Harper had been here, alive, fighting. He turned quickly, scanning the room, heart pounding. No sign of life, no sign of her, just this echo of pain and desperation. Outside, a sharp crack echoed, a rifle shot. Sawyer ducked instinctively as a second shot tore through the air, then a third, closer. He scrambled back through the shaft, snow tumbling over him, landing hard in the drift outside. Cole reared and screamed. Sawyer looked up just in time to see the Mustang stumble sideways. Blood bloomed across his flank, dark against his black coat. The stallion crumpled with a grunt, kicking violently in the snow. "Damn it!" Sawyer rushed to his side, dragging him behind a fallen log. His breath came in clouds as he scanned the tree line. Nothing. No movement. Whoever had fired was already gone. He knelt beside the horse. The bullet hadn't gone deep, grazed the muscle high on the leg. Still, the bleeding was heavy. Cole's sides heaved, eyes wide with pain, but he didn't thrash. Sawyer unzipped his pack and worked quickly, hands moving on muscle memory. Field dressing, pressure bandage, gauze, just like the desert, only colder, deadlier in a different way. "You took that for me," he whispered. "You knew it was coming, didn't you?" Cole blinked slowly, nostrils flaring. He didn't shy away from Sawyer's touch. Somewhere deep in the trees, another noise, crunching snow. Not close, but not far enough. "We've got to move." Sawyer half lifted, half dragged the Mustang toward a small cave he remembered from years ago. Barely more than a cleft in the rock. But it would do. The trip took everything from both of them, and by the time they reached shelter, Sawyer's legs were shaking and his breath came in gasps. Inside the cave, he laid Cole down on dry pine needles, built a fire, and listened. Silence, but not peace. He leaned against the wall and pulled Harper's locator beacon from his pocket. His fingers traced the edge of it, then the initials on the badge, the message on the wall. "They're using the service." That changed everything. Smuggling, human trafficking, weapons. It was something big, and Harper had gotten too close. And now, someone was willing to shoot him just for scratching the surface. Cole shifted beside him, resting his head on Sawyer's boot. There was something eerily human about the gesture. Not fear, trust. Sawyer reached out and ran a hand over the stallion's neck. The horse flinched slightly, then stilled. "You were hers," he said softly. "Weren't you?" He dug into his pack and pulled out the old ranger whistle. Harper's whistle, the one she used in training exercises with the K9s, and, occasionally, with the wild horses when they got too close to trailheads. He gave a sharp, steady blow. Cole lifted his head. Then, to Sawyer's shock, the horse responded with a slow nod, just once, and pressed his muzzle to Sawyer's chest. Sawyer blinked hard. "She trusted you," he murmured, "and now I have to do the same." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Inside, the fire crackled low, throwing dancing shadows on the cave walls, and in the flickering light man and Mustang rested side by side, not as strangers but as survivors bound by a silent oath. Find Harper. Or die trying. The storm had passed, but the cold remained. Sawyer stood at the edge of Timber Ridge, boots coated in slush, hands buried deep in the pockets of his ranger jacket. Below him, the town slept under a blanket of snow and silence. The morning sun filtered weakly through gray clouds, glinting off rooftops like silver foil. Cole stood quietly beside him, his leg freshly bandaged and his body leaning slightly as if still nursing the pain. Yet his eyes, those deep, ember eyes, never left Sawyer's. Back at the cabin, the fire still glowed in the hearth, the heat doing its best to chase away a chill that hadn't come from the weather. Sawyer sat at his workbench, Harper's field journal spread open in front of him. Pages were smudged, corners curled, but her handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, precise, relentless. Each entry read like a breadcrumb, a glimpse into a descent she hadn't been able to stop. March 14th. Inventory shows 3 crates unaccounted for. Reyes says routine error. Mercer brushed it off. Murdoch told me to stop asking. I can't shake the feeling. Something's moving through us. March 18th. tracked unusual truck route, off-road beyond Station 9. Found tire marks by Iron Hook Basin. No map shows that trail, no records. Why? The last entry: if I go missing, follow what doesn't make sense. Don't trust the quiet ones. Sawyer's jaw clenched. He ran a hand through his hair, then stared at the cracked locator beacon lying beside the journal. Its plastic was scorched, metal bent at an angle. But it had worked, at least long enough for Cole to find him. And now, the question wasn't just what happened to Harper. It was who wanted her gone, and why. A knock on the door made Cole lift his head. Sawyer opened it to find a woman bundled in a forest green parka, dark braids spilling from beneath her beanie. She had sharp eyes and a sharper presence. "Lena Mathers," she said, holding out a badge that read Department of Cryptologic Intelligence. "I'm here about Harper Lang." Sawyer blinked. That was fast. Lena stepped in without waiting. Word gets around. He shut the door behind her. "How'd you know I was involved?" "She left me a message," Lena said, pulling a battered USB stick from her coat. "Encrypted, heavily. It arrived 3 weeks ago through a secure Dropbox we used to share in D.C. You were mentioned by name." Sawyer didn't speak, just listened. She thought someone inside the service was rerouting equipment, tagging unregistered transport, chemicals, maybe even weapons, used cover shipments meant for conservation or forest fire supplies. It's the kind of thing that would need high-level cooperation, someone like Mercer or Warden Bryce Murdoch, Sawyer said flatly. Lena met his gaze. "Exactly." Sawyer opened his laptop. They plugged in the USB. Most of the files were corrupted or scrambled, but one folder remained intact. Dozens of scanned documents, inventory logs, altered trail maps, requisition orders under dummy names. A pattern began to emerge. Cole stood behind them, unmoving, his breath quiet. When a particular map came up, a hand-drawn trail leading into Iron Hook Basin, Cole took a single step forward and snorted. "You recognize this?" Sawyer asked him. Cole bobbed his head once. Lena stared. "That's the horse who led you to the bunker, isn't it?" "His name's Cole," Sawyer said. "He was Harper's." There was a beat of silence. Lena exhaled slowly. "Well, that explains the GPS chip we found embedded in his mane. One of ours. She must have tagged him when she knew she was being followed." Sawyer looked up. Then, this wasn't just her trying to survive? Lena nodded. She was leaving a trail. She just didn't know who to trust. Later that day, Sawyer returned to the ranger station, Cole waiting patiently outside. Inside, everything looked normal, too normal, as if no one had almost been killed 48 hours ago in the woods. Amelia Reyes sat at the front desk, typing. She gave him a tired smile. "Sawyer," she said softly, "you shouldn't be here." "I need off-grid access clearance," he said. "I'm heading out again, southward." "Warden's not going to approve that." "Then don't ask him." She stared at him a long moment, then stood, walked around the desk and pulled a drawer from a locked cabinet. Inside, a blank clearance form, a fresh trail map, and a burner sat phone. "If you're going," she said, handing them over, "you're going alone." He nodded once. By sundown, Sawyer and Cole were back on the trail. He carried a day's worth of supplies, the journal, a flare gun, a rifle, and Harper's badge tied to a cord around his neck. Cole moved better now, still stiff, but determined, as if he knew where they were going. Iron Hook Basin didn't appear on any current maps, but Harper's notes painted a different picture. An old logistics route once used by the Army, then abandoned after Cold War testing ceased. According to the journal, it had been reopened and repurposed. Sawyer stopped briefly at the tree line, the snow beginning to fall again, softer this time. He turned to Cole and said quietly, "If we do this, there's no turning back." The Mustang snorted. Sawyer smiled faintly. "Didn't think so." They walked into the dark. The map Harper left wasn't perfect, but halfway through the basin, as the forest grew denser and the terrain rougher, Cole stopped. His ears perked toward a jagged ridge of granite. Sawyer followed his gaze. There, tucked beneath a natural overhang, barely visible behind hanging roots, was another steel door. No keypad this time. Just a series of heavy locks and a symbol etched into the frame. A black pine tree, with roots curling like claws. Sawyer stepped closer, his pulse steady, his breath even. Something big had started here, and it was about to end. The air inside Iron Hook Basin was different, stale, metallic, and laced with something Sawyer couldn't quite name. The kind of smell that lingered in the corners of trauma, where concrete met silence and time forgot to tick forward. Cole stepped cautiously behind him, hooves echoing softly on the cold floor as they moved through the abandoned corridor. The flashlight in Sawyer's hand barely cut through the dark, casting long shadows on rusted walls, exposed wires, and the occasional faded government seal peeled halfway off a bulkhead. They'd found a hidden entrance behind a camouflaged panel, rigged with a simple tripwire that Sawyer had narrowly avoided. Whoever had built this place wanted it forgotten, and whoever had used it since wanted it buried. Every nerve in his body was on alert. The air grew colder as they descended. After a narrow stairwell, the hall opened into a wide underground chamber. It was stripped of most furnishings, but markings remained. Old military crates, faded whiteboards with partial codes and numbers, the skeletons of desks pushed against the walls. Then he saw her. Harper. She was slumped in the far corner, chained by one wrist to a steel ring bolted into the floor. Her face was gaunt, lips cracked, and her uniform was torn and stained with dried blood. But her eyes locked on his instantly, and for a heartbeat neither moved. Then she whispered, hoarse and disbelieving, "Sawyer?" He dropped to her side in seconds, fingers fumbling to free her. "I've got you, I've got you." Harper clutched his sleeve. "Number? You have to listen." "Later," he said. "First we're getting out of here." "There's a notebook," she whispered. "Behind the panel, top left, take it." Sawyer pried the wall open and found it. Waterproof, military issue, duct taped along the spine. Inside were pages filled with names, dates, drop points, encrypted messages, everything she'd been tracking. Suddenly, Cole tensed behind them, ears swiveling. Sawyer felt it too. Air shifted. A breeze. Number movement. The shot came before the thought did. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber. Sawyer ducked, pulling Harper down with him as concrete splintered inches above where her head had been. Cole reared with a sharp cry, shielding them. Another shot rang out and missed. A figure emerged from the shadows near the far exit. Tall, masked, moving with soldier-like precision. Sawyer raised his sidearm and fired twice. The figure darted behind a column, returning fire. Too close, too clean. Cole charged. The Mustang moved like a storm. Fast, deliberate, head down, teeth bared. He slammed into the attacker, knocking them off balance. The gun clattered across the floor, skidding toward Sawyer, who grabbed it and took aim. But by the time he steadied his hand, the attacker had vanished down a second corridor. Just like that, gone. Cole stumbled back, blood running from a gash across his flank. Sawyer was on his knees beside him in a blink, heart pounding. You're okay, boy." Harper pulled herself to a sitting position, grimacing. That wasn't a hired gun, that was trained, one of ours. Mercer? Sawyer asked. Or Murdoch, she said. One of them turned, maybe both. They wrapped Cole's side in gauze torn from Sawyer's pack. The wound wasn't deep, but it was enough to slow him, enough to remind them how little time they had left. Harper leaned against the wall, pale and shaking. The notebook, if we don't make it out, you burn it. Don't let it fall into their hands. You're making it out, Sawyer said. We all are. She smiled faintly, still stubborn as hell. He helped her to her feet, letting her lean on him. Cole walked close, silent and steady. Together they retraced their steps, taking a different exit route that Harper remembered, a maintenance shaft that led to a ranger trail far beyond the standard map. The climb was brutal. Ice lined the ladder rungs. Harper nearly collapsed twice, but she wouldn't let him carry her. And through it all, Cole never once strayed more than 3 feet from them. As they reached the upper clearing, night fell. The forest breathed cold mist, trees shivering beneath the weight of early frost. But the worst of the storm had passed. They collapsed in a small rock shelter near the tree line. Sawyer started a fire with trembling hands. Harper huddled close, notebook wrapped tight in her arms. Cole lay beside them, his breath slow but even. In the silence that followed, Harper finally spoke. I didn't think anyone would come. I didn't either, Sawyer admitted. But then this horse walked into a blizzard like he had a mission. Harper smiled weakly. I taught him that. We used to say, if all else fails, follow the fire. Sawyer looked down at the flames between them, and knew this wasn't over. The next step would be the most dangerous of all, going public. But for tonight they were alive, and tomorrow the truth would begin to burn. The first rays of morning crept over Timber Ridge, spilling light across a frozen landscape that had, for too long, hidden its shadows in silence. Snow still clung to the pines, but the storm had passed. In the cabin of Sheriff Amelia Reyes, a fire crackled low while the scent of coffee filled the air. Sawyer stood by the window, shoulders squared, watching the world settle after the chaos. Harper lay on the couch under a thick wool blanket, her face pale, but her eyes focused and clear. Cole rested beside her, his side freshly stitched and bandaged, but breathing easy. His muzzle occasionally nudged Harper's hand as if checking that she was still real. Sawyer didn't trust quiet mornings anymore, not since Alaska. A knock on the door jolted them all. Amelia answered it with her badge in one hand and her sidearm in the other. It was Lena Mathers. Coat dusted with frost, laptop tucked under one arm, and eyes flashing with urgency. They're moving fast, she said without preamble. I've already uploaded the files from Harper's notebook to secure servers in D.C. Operation Timberfall is officially in motion. Is it enough? Sawyer asked. It's more than enough. This notebook outlines 20 years of corruption inside the Forest Service, trafficking, laundering, military-grade supply leaks. Harper cracked it wide open. Harper pushed herself upright, voice rough but steady. And Murdoch? Lena nodded grimly. He's under surveillance. Mercer too. Arrests will begin before nightfall. Sawyer exhaled slowly, the weight of months, years, beginning to lift. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Later that afternoon, in a secure medical unit set up at the Timber Ridge Community Hall, Harper gave her statement to federal agents. Pale lights overhead buzzed faintly as she recounted everything. Her discovery of the secret operation, her confrontation with Murdoch, and how she was imprisoned when she refused to play along. They told me no one would ever come looking, she said, that the files would be buried and so would I. She looked at Sawyer, who stood silent by the wall. But someone did come, and so did he. She nodded toward Cole, who lay curled at the edge of the room, head raised, eyes locked on hers. When it was over, Sawyer handed over the notebook, his fingers reluctant to let it go. The agent glanced through the first few pages, then said, "You understand this could bring down people in very high places." "That's the point," Sawyer replied. By nightfall, news broke nationwide. Forest Service scandal uncovered. Smuggling ring linked to senior officials. Operation Timberfall, arrests sweep across 4 states. The image that flashed across every screen was one snapped by Jesse Wu, Cole standing beside Harper in the snow, Sawyer's arm steadying her as federal agents moved in the background. The caption read, "The Mustang who led them out." In the weeks that followed, Timber Ridge shifted from a forgotten speck on the map to a place whispered in headlines and echoed in congressional hearings. But the most important change came quietly. At the edge of town, just past the last bend in the road and a clearing where snow melted a little faster, Sawyer, Harper, and Amelia stood beneath a handmade wooden arch. The Cole Sanctuary. The ranch was small for now, 3 stalls, a warming barn, and an open field, but it would grow. Designed to take in wounded Mustangs, retired service animals, and veterans suffering silent wounds, it was part haven, part healing ground. Harper taught riding lessons in the mornings. Sawyer ran security and trail programs in the afternoons. And Cole was everywhere. Greeting newcomers, guiding children through the paddocks, standing silent beside those who needed no words. One day, a little girl arrived with her foster mother. She didn't speak, hadn't since her house fire 6 months earlier. But she walked right up to Cole, placed her forehead against his, and stood there, eyes closed, breathing deep. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Harper watched from the porch, hand over her heart. "He always knew," she whispered, "that some pain can't be talked out, it has to be walked with." That night, as stars burned over the Montana sky, Sawyer sat by the fire pit outside the barn, notebook in hand. Not Harper's this time, his own. Pages filled with thoughts, names, dates, fragments of the trail that had brought him here. Cole wandered over and settled beside him. "You remember all of it, don't you?" Sawyer murmured. The codes, the places, the look in her eyes. The Mustang turned, amber eyes reflecting the flames. Sawyer leaned back against the rail, gaze drifting toward the distant ridgeline. "Some trails," he said softly, "lead home, even when you don't know you're lost." And for once, he didn't feel alone.